So, welcome to Debra and Peter are doing a podcast with me, Peter, and you, Debra.
Morning.
Morning, Debra. For new listeners, we are twins, born on the same day, the same month of the same year, and that's about all we've got in common. And we talk about leadership issues and charity and what's been going on in our lives. So, what's been going on in your life, Debra, since we were last together?
Well, for the absence of confusing our listeners, we're not biological twins. We're twins of the spirit as well as timing. Because I have had people come up to me, Peter, and say, "Oh my God, didn't realise you and Peter were actually twins."
Yeah.
We don't have the same parents.
No, that's
anyway.
true.
Yeah, it's, we've got off to a decent start at DSC. My team are all, given the state of the weather, pretty motivated and pretty focused. So, things crack on as they do. I mean, I'm finding it personally really hard to stay positive with the state of the world, which I'm finding really, worrying, actually. We spoke about this last week, but also the weather. I'm so done with winter. It's sort of, and I know it's not over yet. Technically, It's not spring until March, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But yeah, so I'm having to force myself to be cheery and motivated, which normally I don't find that difficult to do. How about you?
Well, okay. Since we've last been together, I've had a major disaster and a huge triumph.
Oh,
so shall I tell you about both of them? Perhaps
yes.
We should do the disaster first, and then that'll lead into the more positive triumph. So last week, I had to go all the way up to Southport for my aunt's funeral, and not being in full-time work, it was a bit more straightforward for me to find the time to do this than it might have been. I would definitely have found the time in the past, but I just know that I wouldn't have been particularly present as an individual, and I'd have been all the time thinking about doing my emails late at night.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I was reasonably relaxed about it, but it was about a 5-hour drive. So I set off on the Wednesday morning and tootled around the M25 and up the M1, and had a sandwich at Rugby Services and up the toll road and up the M6. And as I got onto the M62, one of my tyres popped as I was going quite fast, and I knew something was wrong, and the car started juddering and all of this. This has never happened to me before, and I sort of pulled over and managed to get onto the hard shoulder. Yeah. I was quite shaken because I was calling the breakdown people, but I didn't quite sort of know what I was doing, and not having been in that sort of situation before. And it's so noisy by the side of a really busy motorway, and the cars are going so fast. So yes, I had to be rescued from the M62, and then not only did I have to be rescued from the M62, and picked up by an amazingly interesting and cool, friendly rescue driver who felt that I was relatively calm compared with some of the people that he picked up. And I said, well, he said, what do you do? And I explained that I used to be someone and I'm not anymore. And that actually that gave me more kind of headspace to come to terms with what was happening, and what will be. But anyway, he rescued me back to a hotel in Southport. And then the following morning, I had to be rescued again by a second person to get the car from the hotel to have the tyre fixed.
Yeah, fixed.
Anyway, it was all sorted. It was sorted before 9 o'clock the following morning, and the funeral wasn't until 2 p.m. So actually,
so you made the funeral.
And I'm so this kind of nothing works in this country anymore kind of feeling. Yeah. As I was standing for about an hour by the M62, I was thinking, what if someone doesn't come, and what if I can't get the tyre fixed, and what if I'm staying up another day? But actually, everything connected with everything else, and it was really good service and support. And so, but that was my disaster.
So we should probably shout out to whichever company it was that you used, Peter.
Yeah, well, it's a collection of companies, isn't it? So I'm with Green Flag, but I can't remember the names of the companies now. But the rescue company that rescued me near Warrington were brilliant, and the rescue company that rescued me again in Southport were brilliant, and the tyre people, and the rescue man took me to his mate, who was like a kind of backstreet tyre person that was probably half the price of Quick Fit, was brilliant and did it in no time at all.
They're so wonderful, these people, aren't they? I remember having to be rescued because my car stopped working, like on a little backcountry lane, which was, as a woman on your own in a place where nobody can see you. That's really frightening. And what had happened is I put petrol in a diesel car without realising. But you know what? He wasn't in the least bit patronising, horribly. He said, it happens all the time. Don't you worry. He said, it's mostly blokes. It's not women. You women don't often make mistakes, which was just, because I thought I was going to have that whole patronising. Oh, yeah, bloody women can't drive. Don't know what, fuel to put in the car. So, yeah, they can be absolutely. Those people, when you need them in times of emergency, are just always wonderful, aren't they?
Amazing. And it's a whole world of kind of networks of people, connecting and engaging with one another and just keeping the show on their own. So then when I drove back the following evening, of course, all I could see as I was driving back down all these motorways was people broken down and rescue vans. And there's an awful lot of it about.
Yes.
It reminded me of my granddad was a small businessman, and he ran a shoe shop. And he said to me, Peter, he said, people will always need shoes. I mean, we know that's true for you, Deborah. People will always need shoes. And I think now people will always need tyres. Tyres is a pretty good business to be in. So, buy shares in tyre companies.
In your retirement, Peter, pardon the pun.
Yes.
That's a field of work you ought to consider.
Maybe I should. And the potholes are just making it worse. So that was my disaster. But now for my triumph.
Go on then.
So 50 years ago, I went to Southport. So it was my aunt's funeral, and my cousin Caroline, who's a couple of years younger than me, she was organising everything up there. So 50 years ago, I was up to stay with them in Easter holidays, and it was her birthday. It must have been her seventh birthday or something like that. And we went to the Sooty and Sweep show at Southport Floral Hall. Now, this is a seminal moment in my childhood because they invited people from the audience up onto the stage to act out a little sort of show. And because I was a precocious, boy on holiday, and there were all these little 7-year-old girls to impress Caroline and her friends, I desperately wanted to get on stage. And so I got on stage, and I was given the part of the villain, and we acted out this play, and then we had to stand with our backs to the audience, and they all voted for who was the best actor. And I was voted as the best actor, and so I got to meet Harry Corbett and Sooty, and I was allowed to pick a Sooty, a Sweep, or a Sue as my prize. And so I picked Sweep because I thought Sweep's got a bit of attitude. And here he is.
Oh my goodness, Peter!
50 years on, this is Sweep.
Yes.
And he's vintage Sweep. Sweep's had a bit of a makeover down the ages. So here's another. For those who are on the audio, this isn't really working, but that's what Sweep looks like these days.
Oh, old Sweep.
He's more modern,
better.
But old Sweep. So 50 years ago, so when I was with my brother, who was also up for the funeral, and we had this time to kill between the tyre being fixed and the funeral, I said, let's go to Southport Pier. Let's see if we can find the Floral Hall, which I'm not sure we did. But anyway, we went to the grabbing machines, and I fancy myself as a bit of an expert on the grabbing machine. So I said, let me show you how this is done. With the second grab, of the grabbing machines, I won myself a gnome. So here is my beautiful Doc gnome. Again, better on the visuals than the audio. But he said, "Oh my goodness, you're so lucky! You're so lucky! You always win things." And I said, "No, look, I've had a disaster. I've had a terrible crash, and this is just balancing things up a bit. And it's not luck; it's skill. This is years of practice. Great Yarmouth." Not Norfolk holidays leads me to get this. So here's Doc, my new friend and mascot, and that's my week.
Oh
my
goodness,
half the podcast,
Peter.
Telling you what I've been up to since last week.
I tell you what, I can't help but think to myself as you're relaying this story that what they say about people as they get older regressing to their youth is somewhat true. And for those who can't see, obviously, that it was Doc, as in one of the 7 dwarves from Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Yeah, very cute.
Yeah. He's got aspirations to be an air traffic controller, so don't tell Donald Trump.
Oh, goodness me.
That's
no,
a deep joke for those who are following what Donald Trump's been saying. Now, the other thing that I've been doing since last week is thinking about whether to take on a role as the chair of a charity. So
yes,
at the end of last week, you encouraged me and then very kindly sent me It's a Battle on the Board, the No Fibbing Guide for Trustees by Debra Allcock Tyler. And so I've read this since we last met and left a review on Amazon and Goodreads. Other places are available. It's great. So much interesting and important insight into, the 2 chapters that I was particularly interested in, and each chapter is named after an ABBA song.
It is, yeah.
You don't need me to tell you that. Were Take a Chance on Me, Working with Your CEO. Clearly that's an important dynamic. And then the Super Trooper, chairing the board, and the particular factors to do a chair in the board that you need to bear in mind. So I don't know. There's all sorts of things I could say about this. You've given me confidence to consider it seriously. I've been a little bit anxious that it's been quite nice this last couple of months not being ultimately responsible for everything. And as the chair, you really are in many ways more than the CEO, aren't you? But as you make clear in the book, the chair is jointly and severally responsible with the other members of the board. So actually, it felt to me, having read that chapter, that it's at least as important to be a really good kind of team builder and appreciative and engaging of the other trustees as it is to hold that responsibility. And I feel instinctively a kind of bit more confident in building the team so we can be collectively responsible than stepping back into feeling like I'm the apex of everything that's going on in the organization, which I guess is really operationally the responsibility of the CEO. And I don't have any immediate desire I feel like I've done that for 15 years and it's time for something else. But what would be your headline thoughts on the essence of being a chair, and particularly what to watch out for?
Well, funny enough, I was doing a session with a wonderful charity, Sussex Pathways, which works in the criminal justice system, yesterday with their board. And actually, my key point there is that because our traditional model of trusteeship of organisations is a pyramid. So the trustees sit at the top, and then the chief exec reports into the trustees, and then it all filters down, at various levels. And that feels like quite a heavy structure, and it's a very sort of patriarchal, Victorian, hierarchical kind of model, which I don't think is particularly effective in the modern world. So I talk about seeing the charity as a pie rather than as a pyramid. And each individual bit of the pie has a very important role to play, but no individual bit is more important than any other bit. So you need the bit of the pie that's the board, you need the bit of the pie that's the chief exec, and you need the staff and the volunteers, and all those bits of the pie come together to make the whole pie. And so each bit needs to work. So one of it is about how you view the charity, rather than thinking of it as a hierarchical structure where people give orders and produce reports and get told off or praised. It's like, how can we work in partnership together? And then the second thing I say that has really struck me over the years, and I wrote about this again recently, is that when I first became a chief executive, I bounced into the role thinking that my board would guide, advise and support me, and then I would get on with delivering. Of course, what I hadn't anticipated were these were 12 people who kept changing over time anyway, because some would go and others would come. They often didn't agree. They had very different views about what the priorities were. And, often I just kind of felt totally isolated. But then I suddenly realized there was one memorable board meeting when they were disagreeing again about what the course of action should be. And one of the trustees turned to me and said very stroppily, "For goodness sake, Deborah, we pay you to tell us what to do." And I kind of felt like, wow. And They weren't right. It's not the job of the chief exec to tell the board what to do, but they were right in the sense that I'm the paid professional advisor, and it's my job to give them advice and information and support and guidance so that they can make the right decisions in their role as trustees. And once I shifted that thinking in my head, and I saw myself as the advisor to the board rather than the victim of the board, or the sort of, you know what I mean? In other words, like that kind of hierarchical fear. It just completely changed the dynamic. It became much more cooperative, partnership-y, etc. And I think that if we as chief execs can, and I also think it's made me a better trustee as well, because as a trustee and as I've been a chair of a board myself, as you know, rethinking it and thinking that this is I need to listen to this person's advice because I'm paying them to be the expert in their field. So I think those are the two key things that immediately spring to mind. It's a pie, not a pyramid, and your chief exec is your paid professional advisor. You don't have to take their advice, but it is their job to give you advice and guidance. And it's sort of get over that kind of ego thing, like it's my job to control and advise the chief exec, because you can't. You're not the expert in the charity. They are, because they're doing it every day. So yeah, those two things I would say.
Yeah. You also make a very powerful analogy in the book about parent and
nannies
nanny.
And parents, yeah.
Yes. Just say a bit more about that, because I thought that was intriguing.
So I compare the relationship between a board and its executive and its staff as a bit like the relationship between a parent and a nanny. So the parents have a child, and for whatever reason, they can't look after the child themselves during the day. So at 7 o'clock, they hand the child over to the nanny, and in the morning at 7 o'clock at night, the nanny hands it back. And the interesting thing about this is that because the nanny is with the child during most of its waking hours, the nanny is the expert in the child during that day, and you pay him or her to be the expert. And the nanny can get very, very attached to the child, of course. And then the parents come back and then start interfering. You know, they'll say to the nanny, right, I want you to feed the child quinoa at, 11 o'clock, and I want it to learn the flute. And the nanny's like, the child will not eat quinoa. It needs burgers and chips. And it hasn't got a cat in hell's chance of learning the flute, but it might have a go at the guitar or whatever. And so the parents need to listen to the nanny, because the nanny is the expert in the child. The conflict happens when the parents forget that the nanny is the expert in the child and stop listening. And when the nanny forgets that the charity isn't their charity, or the child isn't their child, sorry, it belongs to the board. And I think that's often where chief execs can fall into big conflict with boards, because we get so attached to our charities, we start to feel that it's ours, and the board's like interfering in some way or other. And that's why I always say to chief execs, it's not your charity. The charity belongs to the board. It's your job to look after the charity on behalf of the board, and the board will change over time. And so I think that when both sides can understand, the challenges in that relationship, and, that the board, i.e. the parent, takes the advice of the nanny, i.e. the exec, and the exec understands that the ultimate long-term decision-making for the future of the baby or the charity is that of the board stroke the parent.
So it's a great book. It's a battle on the board, and full of interesting, thought-provoking analogies like the ones Debra's just been laying out, but also lots of checklists. So just to you've got the simple kind of box of what a template set of responsibilities for a chair might be, and what some objectives for a chair might be. And I thought, well, that's really useful, because as I walk into this situation, I can look at the extent to which that matches up with what the expectations of the charity are, and make sure that I'm not being engaged to be a quasi chief executive, or kind of set the conditions straight from the from the outset. So, and then you have Ace and Dash, who are, Ace is the kind of dream trustee, and Dash is the kind of pitch up, haven't really read the papers, make the same point I made at the last 17 meetings, and kind of rub everyone else up the wrong way. And they're caricatures, but there are some aspects of each of them that, without naming names, I've certainly recognised in some of the trustees I've worked with down the ages, and probably myself from time to time in the context of Somerset Cricket Club.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you, Peter. Well, thank you so much for the review. So there are other things that have been activating you this week as well. Too much time on your hands, that's what it is.
Too much time. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting was I read a report which More in Common have brought out about progressive activists, and it was really interesting because I think it spoke to the argument stroke conversation which we had a couple of weeks ago about Wes Streeting's comments, where, to slightly exaggerate your position, you were championing single issue, uncompromising people who believed passionately in a particular change that they needed to see delivered, and nothing would or should stand in the way of compromising their ability to deliver that. And I was saying it's all very well being passionate about a particular issue, but if you don't recognize the context you're tipping that into and work with and through others and build alliances and coalitions for change, actually you risk simply shouting, and then there's a judgment about who's shouting the loudest, which you may or may not be fortunate enough to win. But this report splits us out into 7 different types, and there's a quiz which you can take at the front of the review. And one of the 7 categories is progressive activists, and these are people, overwhelmingly young people, over-indexed in charities and policy and public affairs roles, who passionately believe in an uncompromising way about what they want and need to see change. And that is good, because campaigning organizations like ours need youth and energy and uncompromising belief. But at the same time, the evidence suggests that these people are increasingly unable or unwilling to work with others who might hold a different view to them, even on a different aspect of public life, because they are absolutely convinced that they and only they are right. And then that leads you into this whole kind of debate about never kissed a Tory, and who a very kind of pure sense of single issue politics. And so it draws out in this caricature of some progressive activists who I think we are right to admire in some respects, actually some characteristics which I believe are limiting in their ability to affect change, because they're only low teens percentage of the population, and actually the way in which they behave and some of the tactics which they use to try and fulfill their goals are counterproductive, because they rub other categories of people completely up the wrong way, and like throwing orange powder at works of art and stopping traffic on the M25, etc., etc. So I saw people I have worked with as progressive activists, and I saw myself not as a progressive activist, but one of these other categories. I won't say which one, though I think it's fairly obvious when you look at the 7 and run down them. But it made me think that, I've been frustrated by progressive activists from time to time in my role at the NSPCC, and I'm sure that I have frustrated some of the progressive activists that I have employed by what they might feel as my compromising sense of willing to work with and through others in pursuit of a wider goal. So I pinged it across to you. I don't know if you had a chance to have a look at it, but it's by More in Common, and I think it's really interesting.
I will definitely read it. I've managed to look at the summary, that's all, because I've been a bit busy. It's interesting though, because I loathe labelling anyway, Peter. Someone's a progressive activizer or a compromise. I'm like, because there are times when I'm absolutely a progressive activist, and I will not budge my position. There are times when I'm very compromising and cooperative. So I dislike that labelling of people as a certain thing. However, having said that, it's just looking at the history of the world and how change happens. And my trustee, the wonderful Andrew Perkis, who is just one of my all-time heroes in life, he's very strong on this notion that the world changes because of progressive activism, that you have to stir up the mud, you have to stir up the waters, and if you piss people off along the way, that's part of the price, and that it's not necessarily the progressive activists who have to compromise in order to get the end result. So you need the people who are passionate about the cause and who are ruffling feathers and all the rest of it in order to raise the bar so that other people who might be more compromising will come along and help with the delivery. It's a bit like, we can't expect everybody to be everything, to be an activist and a compromiser and all of those things. What we need, it's that whole thing about it's all the brains and all the hands and all the people. You need the mix of people. And so I think that's probably true. I mean, I'll have to have a look at the report. I'm bound to tear it to shreds with, because there was a comparison with the data about what most people believe. And Peter will know I'm always deeply cynical about surveys of attitudes because, people don't even know what they think. Never mind, the whole stuff about saying what you think you ought to say because you want to look good either to yourself or others. But I think it's okay to have that mix of people. And I'm hoping that the message out of the report isn't that progressive activists, you need to change the way you do stuff, because I don't think they do. I think we need them. We need them chucking I think orange paint in the theatre, or we need those people to do that in order to get other people to wake up. At least that has been the history of progression. We didn't change any of the major issues in society because a bunch of very nice, well-off, privileged people sat around and said, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if?" Normally, it's a response to pressure.
I don't think that's true actually, and so I need to develop my list of examples to contradict that. But no, I think the authors of the report are very fair in creating these as caricatures and then posing some questions about what that might imply for how we understand and work with and through one another, rather like Myers-Briggs profiles, which so many people do for away days and working out the different characteristics of people in the team. And I'm sure you are right that the way to achieve best outcomes is to appreciate and understand the different places which people come from. I think progressive activism definition or kind of caricature captures something which
creates conversation.
Some charities have been grappling with and getting a bit confused and cross with one another about, because they can't appreciate and understand where people are coming from. And I do think some of the kind of characteristics of this, and it is a caricature, the progressive activism that says I need to cancel these people or those people because they won't tolerate what I think, is not the way to build large-scale change. But at the same time, if you take some of the other characteristics, and they've chosen to put the spotlight on progressive activists, but if you look at some of the others, there are. It's not like one of these tactics is the one that's most likely to be successful. It's just saying as human beings. Yeah.
Well, that is interesting, because slight aside, but still I think relevant, because my degree is in psychology, and one of the things that we studied was psychometrics, like, the measurement of human behaviour. And the one thing I can say is it's all largely bunkum. Myers-Briggs, all of the extroversion, introversion, all the rest of it. It's all... It's not particularly scientifically sound. And one of the reasons for, I can cheat a Myers-Briggs, Peter. You give me a Myers-Briggs test and I can cheat it easily, because, it's.
What does it mean to cheat a Myers-Briggs test? Because there's no right answers, are there? You can, it's just a sort of sense of.
Except that, Peter, there kind of are the right answers. So the problem is, this is the problem with this labelling business. So when people do psychometrics in the workplaces, let's say they're looking for a leader, very often what they'll be looking for is like an ENFP probably, or an ENTJ. In other words, they'll have an idea of what they want. And if somebody doesn't come out like that, they get dismissed. That's the problem. But the reality is, it's like most of these psychometric tests, and I do a fun one. One's in Tough at the Top, the leadership one and the communication skills one, which I made up myself, which you can totally cheat and you come out whatever. The most important thing about these sorts of things is that they're creating a space of conversation, because the thing is, people do learn and they do change. So, for example, I could be ENFP on a Myers-Briggs. I'm not going to bother wasting time explaining to people. If you're interested, go and look it up. But I can be that. But I can also be a different kind of person. We've had this conversation before. I come across as very extrovert, very gregarious, very instinctive, sort of a bit of a rush to thing. Actually, I read masses. I love detail. I love data and I love spreadsheets. And I really don't like big groups of people. I don't like parties. But you would see me and assume that I was a different kind of person than the person that I feel inside. And also the fact is I will behave differently in different circumstances depending on what's required. So there'll be times when I'll give a rousing speech to 350 people about get out there, march on the streets, whatever. And then I'll have a quieter conversation with a colleague in the civil service or maybe somebody else, in our civil society group, which will be much more measured and much more, so situational stuff makes a difference and all the rest of it. So I think the point is like if we focus on what it is we're trying to achieve rather than who the people are and what they're like, we're much more likely to get to the end result than if we label people and say there's no point talking to Peter because he's, an appeaser.
I'm not an appeaser.
I know you're not.
I'm talking tactics. I'm talking tactics, not strategy.
You are far from an appeaser. I promise. I'm teasing you. That's all I'm doing.
I think as I've got more confident in who I am, deep down as a person, some of these caricature tests and so on help me appreciate difference in others. And I definitely agree with you that one can perform to a role. So the Myers-Briggs of Sir Peter Wanless, Chief Executive of the NSPCC, is distinctly different from, but not massively different from deep down what I would. And you're more likely to be successful in your life if you can align. People say, bring your whole self to work and all of that, don't they?
Well, my whole self changes.
So you don't want. Well, you're a chameleon. We don't want to be too far away from your kind of deep down feelings and your personal. Or if they are, then you need to be able to acknowledge and understand them. And I think Myers-Briggs has helped me appreciate down the years why some people approach issues or challenges in different ways from me, and especially it's helped me respect and enjoy the company of poets and emotional people who feel the pain of others, as opposed to theorize about the pain of others. But time has rushed by. I think
it has rushed by. We had other stuff to talk about as well, but that's all right. Plenty for next week.
Yeah. We'll come back to next week and we'll see what disasters and triumphs can conjure up in the next 7 days.
One thing I've definitely got out of today is I'm going to go and absolutely make sure that my AA membership is fully up to date. Because you know what I mean? It's like, because having someone who can come and rescue you, I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm going to double check. So you've given me that.
And I'm having my car serviced on Friday.
Good idea.
Very good.
All right, Twinny, we should go now then. So thanks, listeners, and talk again next week.